In the vast expanse of the galaxy, where countless species had risen and fallen, there was one truth that every intelligent life form knew, whether they acknowledged it or not: humanity always wins. Across the Milky Way, from the tip of the Cygnus arm to the farthest reaches of the Sagittarius A** cluster, whispers of humanity's impossible resilience and untapped potential were spoken with both awe and fear. At the Galactic Council, a gathering of representatives from every major star system, the subject had come up time and time again. They spoke of humanity as if it were a fleeting curiosity, a species that, though primitive and insignificant in comparison to the ancient civilizations of the galaxy, was constantly rising to the top despite its lack of advanced technology, superhuman abilities, or centuries of wisdom. The Council saw them as a problem that needed solving. Time and again, they had been outwitted, outgunned, and ultimately defeated by a species they had dismissed for so long. The latest discussions about humanity's rise began with an unexpected event. The Draxxer Confederacy, a race of cold-blooded, calculating conquerors, had attacked the human colony on the planet Zeta 9. The Draxxer had been led to believe that humans were weak and ripe for subjugation. The Draxxer fleets, armed with advanced weaponry and centuries of military strategy, arrived with all the confidence of an empire that had crushed hundreds of lesser species. It was meant to be an easy victory. But what the Draxxer didn't know was that humanity's greatest strength had always been its unpredictability, its adaptability. The first Draxxer ships that entered the system were met with an odd, chaotic display of resistance. Ships that should have been easily destroyed managed to evade their powerful weapons with unorthodox tactics. Their soldiers on the ground fought with relentless tenacity, using the terrain to their advantage, even when it seemed like all was lost. The human fleet, outgunned and outclassed, managed to turn the tide by introducing a new kind of warfare, one that the Draxxer had never encountered before. The humans used what could only be described as psychological warfare, something the Council had long dismissed as an ineffective tactic. But humanity was different. They understood that victory did not always come from superior weapons or numbers. Sometimes, it came from breaking the will of the enemy. At Zeta 9, the Draxxer commanders realized they had underestimated humanity. Ships that were once thought to be disorganized and chaotic suddenly formed a cohesive front, striking with a precision and ferocity that the Draxxer had not seen before. The human fleet's tactics were erratic and unpredictable, defying logic and traditional strategies. It became apparent that every human ship was prepared to sacrifice itself for the whole, a concept that no species in the galaxy had fully embraced to such a degree. The Draxxer commanders, accustomed to the calculated maneuvers of their own species, were confounded by the sheer unpredictability of their enemies. They found themselves second-guessing every move they made, wondering if their enemy had planned for this very moment or if it was the result of pure chance. The final blow came when the Draxxer flagship, the Draxier Imperius, made a fatal miscalculation. In a moment of desperation, the Draxxer attempted a full-scale assault on the human fleet's command ship, but the human forces had anticipated it. The flagship's trajectory was manipulated by a daring maneuver that left the Draxxer vessel vulnerable to a surprise counterattack. The Draxxer fleet was decimated. News of the unexpected defeat spread like wildfire through the galaxy. For many, it was a confirmation of a growing, unspoken truth. Humanity, despite being young and raw in the cosmic scale, was a force to be reckoned with. The Draxxer Confederacy, once a dominant force that controlled a vast stretch of space, was forced to retreat. Their empire crumbled, and their reputation was forever tarnished. The Galactic Council convened in a rare emergency session to discuss the implications of the event. It was clear that humanity was no longer a trivial species to be dismissed. The question now on everyone's minds was simple: how had they done it? How had a species so primitive been able to defeat a power like the Draxxer? The answer, though elusive to many, was already becoming apparent to a few. Humanity's secret weapon wasn't technology, wasn't genetic superiority, and it certainly wasn't sheer numbers. It was something much simpler, yet far more dangerous: a relentless, undying will to survive, and an ability to adapt to any challenge. Humanity always wins, not because they are the strongest, but because they refuse to be defeated. As the council members began their deliberations, one thing was clear: the age of human underestimation had come to an end. The galaxy would have to learn to live with humanity, and it would do so either as allies or as enemies. And humanity? They were just getting started. One else could survive. The human colonies didn't just endure, they thrived in a way that baffled the galaxy's most advanced minds. Even the ancient and secretive Eldar species, renowned for their deep understanding of the cosmos, had to admit they were envious of humanity's resilience. The Draxar, who had once scoffed at humanity's primitive way of life, had learned the hard way that there was more to the humans than they had ever realized. Their defeat at Zeta 9 had left them questioning their understanding of strength. It wasn't just raw power or technical supremacy that defined a species. It was something deeper, something ingrained in the way a species responded to the trials of existence. In the months following their retreat, the Draxar attempted to rebuild their empire, but they were not the same. Whispers of humanity's victory reached every corner of the galaxy. The once proud conquerors were now seen as vulnerable, no longer the unstoppable force they had once been. Their retreat had been a calculated decision, but beneath it all, they feared humanity. Fear was something that none of the galaxy's most powerful species had ever anticipated. Fear of the unknown, fear of what humanity might be capable of next. As the Draxar licked their wounds, another species began to take notice of humanity: the Ithan, a race of telepathic beings known for their ability to sense the emotions and thoughts of others. They had remained neutral in the conflicts between other species, preferring to observe and manipulate events from the shadows. But with humanity's rise to prominence, the Ithan felt an unsettling presence, something in the depths of their collective minds that they could not fully comprehend. For the Ithan, there was no greater power than the mind. Their race had long ago mastered the art of psychic communication and control, manipulating the very fabric of reality with their mental abilities. To them, physical force was an afterthought, irrelevant in the grand scheme of things. They could bend the minds of their enemies, make them see illusions, or even control their bodies entirely. The Ithan had never been bested in this way. Yet, in humanity, the Ithan sensed something they had never encountered before: a species that, rather than succumb to mental manipulation, resisted it with a force stronger than their own telepathic abilities. It wasn't that humans had an inherent resistance to psychic powers. No, it was something else entirely. It was the strength of their collective will. Every human mind was an independent entity, yet together they formed a singular, almost impossible to predict force. The Ithan realized with a shudder that no matter how they tried to influence the humans' minds, they could not predict the outcome. In the Grand Hall of the Galactic Council, as representatives from every known species argued over the fate of the galaxy, the Ithan had an unsettling thought: humanity, with all their flaws and contradictions, might be the most dangerous species in the galaxy, not because they were the most powerful, but because they were the least predictable. In the meantime, humanity continued to grow. The United Colonies, once a fledgling group of colonies, now formed a coalition of allied worlds, each one contributing to the larger whole in ways no one had anticipated. They were not a monolithic force. There was no singular government or central power. Instead, humanity's strength lay in their decentralized nature, their ability to self-organize, to adapt, and to find strength in diversity. It wasn't just the military or technological advancements that made humanity strong. It was the way they forged their future together, despite their differences. Every human colony, no matter how small or isolated, contributed something unique to the whole. They were united by the one thing that bound them all: an unwavering will to survive, to improve, and to overcome any obstacle in their path. This decentralized nature also made humanity incredibly difficult to defeat. No empire could crush them all at once. No invader could target a singular weakness. The more the galaxy tried to organize against them, the more humanity seemed to spread, adapt, and grow stronger. In this way, Humanity had become a singular force of unpredictable power. And as the council members looked out over the galaxy, they realized the truth. Humanity was not a passing curiosity. They were a rising tide, and no matter how hard the galaxy tried to push back, they would only continue to grow. The age of human underestimation was over. Humanity wasn't just a species, they were a force of nature, and the galaxy would have to learn to either stand beside them or face the consequences of standing against them. And humanity? They were still just getting started. With each passing day, humanity's reputation spread further across the stars. Despite the Galactic Council's efforts to undermine and isolate them, the relentless drive of humanity had proven to be a force that could not be stopped. The defeat of the Draxxer Confederacy had been only the beginning. What followed was a cascade of victories, each more improbable than the last, but all pointing to one undeniable truth. Humanity's greatest strength was not in its advanced technology, its fleets, or its alliances. It was in their unwavering, unyielding will to survive and conquer every challenge thrown their way. The galaxy watched in both awe and growing fear as humanity began to reshape the very fabric of galactic power. Their colonies, now spanning numerous systems, thrived against all odds. Even the harshest environments, planets with toxic atmospheres, extreme gravity, or extreme cold, became home to human life. The colonies were no longer just surviving. They were evolving, becoming stronger, and slowly turning the tide in favor of humanity in the galactic economy. This new era of human expansion wasn't built on superior technology alone. Humanity understood how to make the most of what they had, utilizing resources in innovative ways. They learned from their mistakes and constantly adapted. While other species might have clung to their old ways of thinking, relying on technologies that had served them for centuries, humans pushed forward, inventing new solutions to new problems, even if those solutions weren't immediately efficient. It was this stubbornness, this refusal to accept defeat, that set them apart. Their victories were not always clean, nor were they guaranteed. Sometimes it was sheer luck. Sometimes it was pure ingenuity. But every time, humanity learned and grew stronger. And as they continued to do so, other species took notice. The Vrelians, an ancient race of insectoid warriors, were among the first to recognize that humanity was not just a nuisance. Their once glorious empire, spread across multiple star systems, had ruled with an iron claw for millennia, conquering lesser species with ruthless efficiency. But the Vrelians were now facing a problem they had never encountered before. Humanity's unpredictable tactics were starting to erode their power. Vrelian warlords, once revered for their unmatched skill in battle, were finding themselves outwitted by human strategists. Human fleets, once considered laughable, were now taking Vrelian strongholds with an efficiency that stunned the insectoid race. But it wasn't just the military prowess that worried the Vrelians. It was the way humanity seemed to think outside the box, finding new tactics and countermeasures that outpaced even the Vrelians' most sophisticated technology. Where the Vrelians relied on brute force and their sheer numbers, humanity relied on innovation and an ability to adapt quickly. The Vrelians had once prided themselves on their flawless battle strategies, developed over centuries of conflict. But when they met humanity on the battlefield, their long-established tactics faltered. The humans' creativity was a constant wild card, an unpredictable variable that no one could anticipate. The Vrelians soon realized they were not just fighting against humanity's fleet, they were fighting against something far more dangerous: their minds. Meanwhile, the united colonies of humanity had begun to establish themselves as a central hub in the galactic economy. Their industrial capacity, while once modest, had exploded, driven by the ingenuity of human entrepreneurs. These human-led corporations, often formed by ex-soldiers, engineers, and scientists, were now some of the most powerful entities in the galaxy. They began to dominate trade routes, providing rare technologies and resources that even the most advanced civilizations had long given up on. But what set humanity apart in the economic world wasn't just their products, it was their willingness to negotiate. Where other species might have used their superior resources to bully weaker races into submission, humanity employed diplomacy and strategy to win allies and increase their influence. They understood that the future of the galaxy wasn't just in firepower, it was in the strength of relationships, and humanity was the master of making connections. They understood that, in a galaxy filled with so many varied cultures and agendas, adaptability and compromise were just as powerful as a well-placed missile. As humanity's influence continued to spread, the Galactic Council found itself increasingly divided. Some of the more traditionalist factions, those that had long held the reins of galactic power, saw humanity's rise as a threat. They knew that if humanity were allowed to continue unchecked, they would not only challenge the existing order, they would replace it. And that could not be allowed. In the shadows of the Council's chambers, a new coalition began to form, a group of powerful species who saw humanity's unpredictability as a danger to their well-established systems. These species, tired of humanity's chaotic rise, began to plot a way to neutralize the threat before it could get any stronger. Among them were the Shadrik, a race of cold, calculating bureaucrats who had once governed the galactic trade routes, and the Kralians, a species whose technologically advanced war machines could decimate entire fleets. They were willing to do whatever it took to ensure that humanity would not be allowed to thrive. They could no longer ignore the growing power of humanity. They had no choice but to act. But humanity, for all its faults and weaknesses, was not easily stopped. Its members, from the humblest colony to the highest levels of leadership, shared one thing: the unshakable belief that they could overcome any obstacle. This belief had carried them through countless battles, crises, and hardships. It was their true weapon, more powerful than any fleet or weapon, and it would see them through whatever challenges lay ahead. As the galactic powers prepared to take action, humanity stood at a crossroads. They could continue to fight for their place in the galaxy, or they could fall under the weight of the established power's wrath. But no matter the outcome, one thing was certain: the galaxy had underestimated humanity for the last time. The battle for the future had only just begun. The tensions in the galaxy had reached a boiling point. While the Galactic Council's traditionalist factions plotted to curb humanity's rapid expansion, the humans had no intention of standing idly by. They were accustomed to overcoming obstacles, and this was just another challenge to face. The galaxy had thought they could control the rise of humanity, but they had failed to understand the most essential truth: when humans are pushed, they push back harder. The coalition of species determined to neutralize humanity, comprised of the Shadrik, the Kralians, and a handful of other powerful races, had quietly begun to marshal their resources. The Shadrik, with their unparalleled bureaucratic influence, worked behind the scenes to impose crippling trade sanctions on human colonies. They manipulated galactic markets, aiming to starve humanity out of vital resources. The Kralians, known for their devastating war machines, began to discreetly form an alliance with the Draxar remnants, seeking a way to launch a surprise strike against humanity's growing fleet. At the same time, the galaxy's most established civilizations, those that had once considered humanity beneath their notice, began to see the writing on the wall. These ancient empires, with their grand histories and advanced technologies, could not afford to let a species as unpredictable as humanity rise to dominance. It wasn't just fear of human strength that drove them, it was fear of the unknown. The human spirit was a force that none of them could replicate or control. But what these powerful races did not know was that humanity's greatest strength lay in their unity, something that couldn't be broken through force or manipulation. Humanity had learned to survive, adapt, and thrive through centuries of hardship. From the depths of their darkest history, they had come to value community, cooperation, and the power of individual will. Where other species saw a single person as insignificant, humans understood that the sum of their parts was far greater than the whole. In the heart of human space, leaders began to realize the magnitude of what they were facing. The United Colonies had grown from a handful of outposts into a vibrant network of worlds, united not by the force of one ruler, but by the collective will of billions. Despite their differences in culture, philosophy, and even politics, they shared a deep sense of purpose, survival, and growth. A series of emergency meetings were held among the human colonies. At the helm of these discussions was Admiral Sarah Callahan, a decorated war hero from the Zeta-9 campaign, who had become the symbol of human resilience. Her leadership in the battle against the Draxer had elevated her to an iconic status across the galaxy, and her influence now extended far beyond the military. Admiral Callahan knew that humanity couldn't rely solely on their military prowess to win this fight. The galaxy's coalition was powerful, but they had underestimated the willpower of humanity. In her eyes, the key to defeating their enemies wasn't through brute force, but by striking at the heart of their fears. The traditionalist factions, especially the Shadric and the Krallians, believed in control and dominance. They were creatures of order and precision, but humanity thrived on chaos, on unpredictability. And that was exactly what Callahan intended to exploit. Working alongside her were the leaders of the human colonies, including President Eliana Morrow, the newly elected leader of the United Colonies. Morrow, a former scientist turned politician, had a unique perspective on the conflict. She saw the galactic powers as victims of their own stagnation. The Shadric, with their obsession over bureaucracy, and the Krallians, with their military might, were locked in a cycle of self-preservation. But humans had something they did not: the ability to evolve, to break free from the constraints of tradition and adapt to the demands of the present. Together, they formulated a plan that relied on humanity's greatest asset, its adaptability. The first step was to outsmart their enemies at every turn. Callahan's fleet was quick and agile, designed for hit-and-run tactics, ambushes, and misdirection. It was a fleet built for the long game, not brute force. Meanwhile, Morrow's diplomatic channels began to engage with neutral parties, slowly winning over allies who had once feared the growing human influence. The goal wasn't just military victory, it was to make humanity indispensable to the future of the galaxy. However, the coalition of opposing forces was not blind to these moves. The Shadric, realizing that the human fleet would be difficult to defeat outright, initiated a covert campaign to disrupt their economic supply chains, targeting key human trade routes. The Krallians, seeing the humans' tactical advantage, began to build alliances with some of the galaxy's most formidable mercenary groups, preparing to strike at vulnerable colonies and weaken human resolve. Yet, humanity had already anticipated this. The human colonies had long known that in order to survive, they needed to be self-sufficient. Resource gathering, industrial production, and scientific research had all been diversified across the stars. No single colony or system was too vital. The humans' infrastructure, while not as polished as some of the older galactic empires, was vast, decentralized, and resilient. As the pressure mounted, the humans began to strike back. The Krallian mercenaries, so used to overwhelming their enemies, found themselves outmatched in unexpected ways. They attacked one of the outer colonies, expecting an easy victory, only to encounter a network of underground resistance fighters, armed with improvised weaponry and guerrilla tactics. Humanity's ability to fight not just with technology, but with sheer creativity and determination, confounded their attackers. The Krallians soon found themselves in a drawn-out battle with no clear resolution. Meanwhile, the Shadric's attempts to destabilize humanity's economy faltered as well. The human response was swift: resource stockpiling, rapid development of new trade routes, and countermeasures designed to outlast any embargo. In short order, the Shadric found themselves not weakening humanity, but unwittingly strengthening it, as new human alliances flourished in response to the artificial scarcity. And so, the war began in earnest. Not just a battle of fleets or armies, but a battle of wills, a battle of survival against the most powerful forces the galaxy had ever known. But humanity, ever adaptable and unyielding, was prepared. The rising tide of human resistance was unstoppable, and the galaxy's most powerful species were beginning to realize that they might have underestimated humanity once again. In the heart of the galaxy, the first shots were fired. But the real war had just begun. And in this war, humanity was no longer a forgotten species. They were a force to be reckoned with. The conflict between humanity and the galaxy's entrenched powers had escalated rapidly. With each passing day, the stakes grew higher. Humanity's ability to adapt, strategize, and survive had put them on a collision course with the Shadric, the Krallians, and their allies, but what no one expected was the emergence of a new, unseen threat that would push humanity to its limits. The war had taken a new dimension. Humanity's efforts to outmaneuver their enemies and gain allies were met with resistance at every turn, but it was the emergence of an unknown species, the Vectori, that shifted the balance of power. For centuries, the Vectori had remained in the shadows, a race of hyper-intelligent, near-immortal beings with the ability to manipulate the very fabric of space and time. Their existence had been nothing more than a myth, dismissed by the majority of the galaxy as fantasy. But now, they were emerging from the darkness. The Vectori were not interested in domination or conquest. Instead, they sought to control the flow of history itself, manipulating events and timelines to suit their mysterious agenda. Their technology was beyond comprehension, their minds able to influence the fabric of reality itself with a mere thought. Their arrival in the conflict was not as invaders, but as observers. Yet it was clear that their presence was not one of neutrality. Their motives were unclear, but their methods were unsettling. They had observed humanity's rise, and their attention now turned toward the human colonies. The galaxy's established powers, who had been focused on their conflict with humanity, were suddenly forced to confront the Vectori. These beings, who had played a subtle yet significant role in galactic history, began influencing events behind the scenes. Unknown to the Council, the Vectori had been shaping the rise of humanity for generations, subtly nudging their evolution, helping them survive and thrive when it seemed impossible. But now, it was clear they had an agenda of their own. As humanity fought against the Krallians, Shadric, and their allies, Admiral Callahan received a cryptic message from a mysterious source. The message was encoded in a series of time-distorted frequencies, messages that seemed to stretch across time itself. After weeks of decoding, the message revealed the existence of the Vectori and their role in humanity's rise. "We have guided your kind for millennia, watching from the shadows," the message read. "You are a necessary catalyst, a force that will reshape the galaxy. But the balance must be maintained. You are a variable we cannot control. Your survival depends on your understanding of the forces that shape you." It was a chilling revelation. Humanity's strength, their will to survive, their creativity, it wasn't entirely their own. The Vectori had been watching over them, shaping their path, guiding them in ways they couldn't begin to comprehend. The message left more questions than answers, but one thing was clear. The Vectori had decided that humanity was no longer just a species to be manipulated. They were a force to be reckoned with. This knowledge sent shockwaves through the highest levels of human command. Admiral Callahan, already struggling with a mounting war on all fronts, now found herself caught between two unstoppable forces: the ancient galactic powers who sought to control humanity and the Vectori, whose true motives remained a mystery. In the middle of this crisis, President Morrow convened a summit of the United Colonies leadership, desperate to find a way to navigate this new, complex reality. The Vectori's presence could not be ignored, but how could they be confronted when their abilities transcended everything humanity had ever encountered? Could humanity still maintain its independence and fight against the established powers without risking the Vectori's intervention? During the summit, it became clear that the Vectori were not simply watching, they were intervening. Strange occurrences began to happen across human colonies. Entire fleets vanished from radar, entire regions of space were altered, and reports emerged of human ships and colonies being mysteriously repaired by an unknown force, as though the laws of physics themselves were being bent. Some speculated that the Vectori were trying to help humanity, while others feared they were toying with them, preparing them for some unknown purpose. Despite the uncertainty, one thing was becoming increasingly clear to the human leadership: the Vectori were playing a dangerous game. Humanity's survival was no longer solely in their own hands. The Vectori's interference had made it impossible to determine if humanity's victories were the result of their own strength or the result of manipulation by these enigmatic beings. But if humanity had learned one thing, it was that they had the ability to change the course of their own destiny. They had already defied expectations, and they would do it again. Admiral Callahan's next move was bold. Rather than fighting against the Vectori's influence or trying to appease them, humanity would confront them head-on. Using a combination of their military, technological, and diplomatic forces, the United Colonies launched a covert operation to discover the true extent of the Vectori's influence on humanity. With the help of a small group of scientists, diplomats, and military officers, Callahan set out to find the heart of the Vectori's influence, a hidden station deep in uncharted space where the Vectori were said to manipulate timelines. This mission would not be an easy one. The Vectori station was well guarded by strange, shifting anomalies that seemed to defy space-time itself. Any ship that ventured too close had vanished without a trace, leaving only whispers of its existence. Yet, humanity's greatest weapon had always been its determination. If the Vectori had shaped humanity's rise, humanity would shape their own future. The journey to uncover the Vectori's true motives would take them into the heart of the unknown, where they would either uncover the secrets of the galaxy's most enigmatic race or fall into a trap from which there would be no return. One thing was certain: humanity would no longer be a pawn in anyone's game. The future was theirs to carve. The mission to uncover the true nature of the Vectori's influence had begun. As humanity's most elite crew prepared for the journey into the heart of the unknown, the stakes had never been higher. If they succeeded, they would not only gain control over their own future, but also expose the mysterious force that had shaped their rise. But the Vectori, with their mastery over time and space, were not easily confronted. And those who ventured too close to their hidden station had vanished, leaving only shattered ships and unanswered questions. Admiral Callahan's fleet, composed of some of humanity's finest minds and warriors, embarked on the journey to this distant, uncharted region of space, a place so far removed from galactic civilization that it was almost a legend. The area was known as the Null Zone, an area where space itself seemed to warp and shift. Ships had been known to disappear, time to slow, and entire fleets to become lost within its twisted corridors. The Null Zone had been avoided by all but the bravest or most foolish, and many speculated that it was the domain of the Vectori. For years, rumors of strange anomalies and unexplained phenomena had circulated, but no one had ever returned to confirm them. Humanity's fleet was unlike any the galaxy had seen. Rather than relying on brute strength or overwhelming numbers, it had been designed for speed, adaptability, and stealth. The ships were equipped with advanced cloaking technology, allowing them to slip through the anomalies without detection. Additionally, a team of scientists from the leading human research institutions had developed a new form of quantum navigation to mitigate the unpredictable effects of the Null Zone, giving them a rare advantage. They could chart their path through the chaos. As they crossed the threshold into the Null Zone, the crew of the flagship Vanguard felt the shift immediately. The stars dimmed, the very fabric of space seemed to ripple around them, and the ship's sensors began to glitch. Time itself appeared to be distorting. Some parts of the crew reported seeing brief glimpses of possible futures, flashes of potential events yet to occur, and others swore they had glimpsed distant memories that hadn't yet happened. The Null Zone was alive with uncertainty, an intangible place where the very laws of physics seemed to bend and break. In this strange, unsettling environment, Admiral Callahan remained calm. Her eyes remained fixed on the screen, scanning for any sign of the hidden Vectori station. They had come for answers, and they would find them. Her resolve was unwavering, for she understood that this mission was not just about uncovering the truth. It was about humanity reclaiming its destiny. The Vanguard continued deeper into the Null Zone, passing through unstable rifts in space-time. Each jump was met with resistance, and at every turn, something new threatened to disrupt their course. The ship's cloaking systems were pushed to their limits as they navigated through fields of temporal rifts and warped space. It wasn't just technology that was needed to survive in this environment, it was human will, creativity, and adaptability. In the midst of the turbulence, Callahan called a meeting with her senior officers. They had to be prepared for anything, and the uncertainty of what lay ahead weighed heavily on them all. The Vectori were not an enemy that could be defeated by conventional means. Their mastery of time and space gave them an advantage that no one could match. "Whatever happens next, we have to stay united," Callahan said, her voice steady despite the strain of the journey. "The Vectori aren't just observers, they're the ones who have shaped our rise. But they've been manipulating us for too long. We need to show them that humanity isn't a pawn anymore. We make our own future." Her words carried weight, and the crew, though facing the unknown, took solace in her leadership. They were fighting not just for survival, but for the right to shape their own destiny, free from unseen forces that had pulled their strings for so long. As they ventured deeper into the null zone, the anomalies grew stronger, and the crew began to sense something far beyond the physical distortions. The ship's sensors began picking up faint signals, anomalies in the fabric of space-time itself. The crew could feel it. They were close to the heart of the Vectori's hidden station. It was as if the very essence of the place was pulling at their minds, warping their perceptions of reality. Then, without warning, the Vanguard was pulled into a rift. Time itself seemed to splinter, and the ship was torn from one moment into another. The crew experienced a dizzying sense of déjà vu, flashes of impossible futures blending with memories of the past. For a brief moment, they lost contact with the outside universe, and everything went silent. The ship hung in a strange, timeless void, caught between past and future. It was then that they saw it, a colossal structure, hidden within the fabric of the null zone. The Vectori station, shaped like a labyrinth of impossibly precise geometry, loomed before them. Its surface shimmered, flickering in and out of existence as though it were both present and absent at the same time. The architecture was unlike anything the human eye had ever seen, built not with materials, but with the very structure of space itself. The station seemed to be alive, pulsating with an energy that was both unsettling and beautiful. There were no obvious entrances, no clear way inside, yet the ship's systems indicated that they had arrived. It was clear that the Vectori had not simply built a station, they had created a nexus point, a space where time and space merged into something unrecognizable. Admiral Callahan ordered the fleet to stop at a safe distance. The crew was on high alert, preparing for whatever came next. But before they could make their move, a voice resonated through their comms, a voice that was neither male nor female, but something far more ancient, far more alien. "You have come," the voice said, its tone neither welcoming nor hostile. "You have followed the path we have set for you. Now, the question is, will you accept your destiny, or will you defy it?" The crew was silent, unsure of how to respond. The message was cryptic, yet powerful. The Vectori were aware of their arrival, and they had been waiting. In that moment, Admiral Callahan knew that the true battle was not one of firepower or strategy. It was a battle for control over the future itself. The Vectori had played their part, but now humanity had a choice. They could either accept their place in the grand design, or they could forge their own destiny. The future was in their hands. The question was, what would they do with it? The Vectori's voice echoed through the Vanguard's comms, sending a shiver through the crew. There was a coldness in the words, an ancient and calculating force behind them. The question was simple, but its weight was crushing. Will you accept your destiny, or will you defy it? Admiral Callahan stood at the front of the command center, her eyes fixed on the flickering shape of the Vectori station ahead. The crew could sense the tension in the air. This was no ordinary moment in history. This was a defining moment for humanity. The choices they made here would shape the fate of their species for millennia to come. The Vectori, with their mastery over time and space, had been manipulating the rise of humanity for centuries. They had guided humanity through its darkest moments, ensuring their survival when it seemed impossible. But now they wanted something in return. They wanted humanity to accept its place in the grand design, to become a tool in a much larger, far-reaching plan, a plan that humanity had never agreed to nor understood. The voice spoke again, more insistent this time. "You are not the first to come to this crossroads," it said. "Many have fallen to their desires for autonomy, but none have succeeded in changing the course of fate. You are merely a moment in time, a fleeting spark in the endless flow of history. But your actions may disrupt everything that has been foreseen." The crew listened in stunned silence. The Vectori spoke of them as if they were insignificant, yet somehow the message was tinged with a subtle respect, as though humanity's very defiance had drawn their attention. The question remained, could humanity defy the flow of time itself? Callahan knew this was the moment that would define her legacy and humanity's future. She turned to her officers, the ones she trusted most, seeking a consensus. The choice, ultimately, had to be theirs as much as hers. Lieutenant Colonel Thaddeus Cole, the ship's second-in-command, spoke up first. His face was grim, his voice steady. "Admiral, we know what they've done. They've steered us in directions we didn't even understand. They've made us dependent on their guidance, and now they expect us to bow to them." He paused, his gaze hardening. "I say we fight. We defy them. It's our future, and we won't let them decide it for us." "I agree," said Dr. Alina Serov, the chief scientist, who had been working alongside Callahan's team to understand the Vectori's technology. "These beings have been shaping humanity like a puppet on a string. But what they don't understand is that humanity's greatest strength has always been its unpredictability. We're not bound by fate or destiny. We write our own stories." "I don't know if we can win this, though," said Commander Kale, the fleet strategist. "The Vectori are not like anything we've faced before. Their influence over time, it's not just technology, it's an entire philosophy. They think they control everything. If we fight them, we risk tearing apart the very fabric of reality itself." A silence fell over the room, heavy with the weight of their dilemma. Could they truly defy the Vectori and their vast power over the very nature of existence? Were they strong enough to shatter the chains of destiny? Or would they be crushed by forces far beyond their understanding? Callahan considered this for a long moment. She understood the risk. Defying the Vectori could mean unraveling the galaxy itself, and yet the cost of submission was far worse. She knew the people she commanded, the citizens of the United Colonies, would never accept being pawns in someone else's game. They had built their society on the principles of freedom, self-determination, and the belief that even in the face of overwhelming odds, they could overcome any challenge. Humanity was built on defiance. And for better or worse, they had never been good at following someone else's rules. "I'm not asking anyone to take this lightly," Callahan said finally, her voice carrying a weight that resonated with every member of the crew. "We know the risks. We know the consequences. But I will not let humanity's future be decided by forces we can't even understand. We make our own path. If we fail on our own terms. And if we succeed, we'll show the galaxy that no one, not even the Vectori, controls our destiny." The room erupted in a quiet chorus of agreement. There would be no turning back now. They had chosen to fight, not just for survival, but for freedom, for the very right to shape their own future. The path forward was unclear, but one thing was certain: humanity would not go quietly into the shadow of the Vectori. Callahan turned to her fleet's navigational officer, a young and brilliant mind named Lieutenant Zoe Grant. "Prepare the fleet. We're going in." The Vanguard surged forward, its sleek hull cutting through the warped space-time surrounding the Vectori station. The crew was ready, though uncertain of what awaited them. They were about to face an enemy unlike any other, one that could reshape the very laws of nature. But humanity's determination would not be swayed. They would face this threat head-on. As they approached the heart of the Vectori station, the very space around them seemed to bend and twist, as if the universe itself was protesting their arrival. Time fractured, and the ship's systems began to glitch once more. But Callahan's resolve was unwavering. They had come too far to turn back now. They would either change the course of history, or become another forgotten footnote in the Vectori's grand design. The crew watched as the station loomed closer, its impossible geometry shimmering in and out of reality. And as they neared the heart of the Vectori's domain, the voice returned, this time colder than before. You have made your choice. Now you will face the consequences. The Vanguard pressed forward into the unknown, its crew bracing for whatever was to come. Time itself seemed to stretch and warp around them, and the very fabric of existence felt fragile. But Callahan, and humanity along with her, was ready. They would not bow to fate. The fight for their future had only just begun. The Vanguard and its fleet had entered the heart of the Vectori station, and with each passing moment, the crew could feel the overwhelming presence of their unknown adversaries. Time itself seemed to bend, flicker, and snap under the pressure, like a taut string being pulled in all directions. The very laws of physics were unstable, and the station pulsated like a living organism, its architecture an unearthly blend of fractal geometry and chaotic temporal rifts. As the ships neared the core of the station, a final warning blared across the comms from the Vectori. You cannot break what is already set. The flow of time is beyond you. You are but fleeting sparks, unable to alter the grand design. Admiral Callahan's voice cut through the oppressive atmosphere. We are not sparks. We are the fire. She turned to her crew, determination burning in her eyes. This is it. We either end this cycle, or we become part of it. The Vanguard and its fleet made their final approach. Callahan knew that their survival, no, their future, depended on their ability to break free from the Vectori's influence. The question wasn't whether they would fight, it was how they could overcome an entity that seemed to control time itself. If they were to succeed, it would be because of one thing the Vectori never understood: humanity's ability to adapt, to think outside the constraints of any system. As they entered the heart of the station, the Vanguard and the other ships were immediately surrounded by the intense gravitational and temporal anomalies that had been swirling around the station. Space itself bent in impossible angles, twisting around them, distorting reality. The crew saw flashes of other realities, future timelines, alternate outcomes, all jumbled together like a surreal dream. In the midst of this chaos, Dr. Alina Serov, humanity's leading scientist, had been working relentlessly to understand the station's mechanics. She had uncovered something important. The Vectori's control over time wasn't absolute. It was based on a pattern, a cycle that had been playing out for eons. The Vectori had been manipulating this cycle, but they had underestimated humanity's potential to disrupt it. She approached Callahan's command station, her face flushed with urgency. Admiral, I've found something. The Vectori are bound by their own paradox. They can control the flow of time, but they cannot fully predict it. They've been trying to maintain a cycle, but the cycle is flawed. It's been vulnerable ever since humanity's rise. We can break it. We can fracture their grip on time. Callahan's eyes hardened. How? We need to overload their core system. But we must sync with the station's temporal pulse, and that requires a precise strike at the heart of the station. If we're too early or too late, we'll be consumed by the temporal rift. But if we succeed, we can disrupt the flow and destroy their control over the galaxy. Callahan didn't hesitate. Prepare the fleet. We're going in. The Vanguard's engines roared to life as it surged forward into the core of the station. Time itself seemed to twist, becoming an unpredictable force. The crew felt the strain of the distortions as the ship moved through the layers of warped reality. They were about to confront not only the Vectori, but the very nature of the universe itself. As they neared the heart of the station, the Vectori made their final move. The voice returned, more urgent, now laced with frustration. You cannot stop us. We have seen the future. Your resistance is futile. But Callahan was ready. With a single command, she initiated the strike. The fleet's weapons locked onto the station's temporal core, and the ships released a barrage of energy pulses designed to destabilize the temporal matrix that held the station together. At the same time, Dr. Serov activated the synchronization code, aligning their strike with the station's pulse. The explosion was unlike anything the crew had ever witnessed. A wave of energy washed over the station, cascading outward, ripping apart the very fabric of time. The Vectori station, its intricate and unfathomable structure, began to collapse, its grasp on the timeline unraveling like a fraying thread. For a moment, it seemed as though the universe itself would fall apart. The fleet was rocked by waves of temporal energy, and flashes of alternate realities played out in their minds. Some saw themselves in futures that had never happened. Others glimpsed alternate versions of their own deaths. It was as though the very essence of existence was being tested. But humanity endured. The vanguard held steady, its shields flaring as they pushed through the collapse. Slowly, the energy waves began to dissipate, and the station, the source of the Vectori's power, fell silent. The crew held their breath, watching as the fractured remnants of the station drifted into nothingness, a fading echo in the space-time continuum. "We did it," said Lieutenant Colonel Cole, his voice low, almost reverent. "We broke the cycle." But Dr. Sarev's face was grim. "The Vectori won't just disappear. They've been manipulating us for so long. We can't expect them to give up quietly." The voice of the Vectori returned, this time faint, almost distant. "You think you have one, but you cannot erase what is. The cycle will return, and we will find another way to shape the future." Callahan stood resolute, her voice unshaken. "No, Vectori. You underestimate humanity. We have broken your hold. We choose our future, and we will fight for it." With the station now a dying wreck, the Vectori's influence began to dissipate. The temporal rift slowly closed, and reality began to stabilize. Humanity had severed the chains that had bound them, breaking free from the Vectori's manipulation. The fleet drifted in the silence that followed, the weight of their victory sinking in. They had defied the impossible, not just surviving, but altering the very fabric of reality. Humanity had not only conquered its enemies, they had conquered time itself. As the crew of the Vanguard looked toward the stars, they knew their journey was far from over. They had proven that humanity could overcome any challenge, even the most ancient and incomprehensible forces. The galaxy, once controlled by the hidden hands of the Vectori, was now free. And humanity, with all its flaws, creativity, and defiance, would shape its own destiny. No longer a mere spark in the vastness of the universe, they were now a force to be reckoned with, unstoppable and unshackled.